Good morning, and welcome to the First Universalist Church of Yarmouth. My name is Andrew Tonks. I'm a member of the Board and Worship Council. I'm happy to be greeting you this morning. It's good to be together, even remotely. At First Universalist, our mission is to explore our faith, embrace this community, and engage the world as spiritual seekers. May we take these words to heart. As we gather this morning, we acknowledge that our church and many of our homes are built on the ancestral land of the Abenaki, who united with the Penobscot, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Maliseet people in 1606 to form the Wabanaki Confederacy, the people of the first light, the people of the Dawnland. The town of Yarmouth, The town of Yarmouth lies in a region that was once called the Ockosisko. Translated from Abenaki, Ockosisko means place of herons. This region later came to be known as the Bay of Helmets by the Spanish, for whom the word for helmet is casco, and so this area became known as Casco Bay. We acknowledge that we gather today on indigenous land that does not belong to us. This land was taken from the Abenaki through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Indigenous people in Maine and across the country. We honor and stand in support of their commitments to survival, sovereignty, identity, and the protection of our world. Please take a moment of quiet with me now to honor these truths and to honor this land. Before our service begins this morning, I have the following announcement. Though vaccine distribution is steady in our state, the number of people infected with COVID-19 in Maine still remains high. For the safety of our community and staff, the First Universalist Church does not anticipate reopening our church building until September 2021. We do, however, anticipate being able to continue to hold some outdoor gatherings following guidance from the UUA. As our church community considers reopening, we are committed to following the guidance from the UUA and are currently forming a reopening team who will work to develop a strategy and guidelines for reopening our church. The reopening team will consider inclusion and consent, the current science, flexibility of offerings, and the deep desire to gather together again in person in their planning. There will be many questions to consider as our faith-based community moves forward, and we aim to do so with care and due diligence. Please feel welcome to send any questions you may have about the reopening plan to the board or to Reverend Hillary. As we now begin our service, let's all take a deep breath. And settle into this sacred space and time we create together each week. Reverend Hillary will now lead us into our worship.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Sam, for playing music today. And thank you, as always, to Pete and Kai, our trusty and beloved tech crew. Good morning. How are you? My name is Reverend Hillary Collins-Gilpatrick. I'm the minister of First Universalist Yarmouth, and it's with joy that I say, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, whatever you've done, you're welcome here. And we're glad you're here. My friends, it's May. Can you believe it? Our theme for the month of May is story. And now we've spent a solid chunk of this church year considering and questioning the stories we tell and the stories we've been told about all sorts of things. The stories we tell and are told about American history stories about people who hold different views than we do, stories about our UU principles, stories about the hymns we sing, stories about whiteness, stories about Jesus, tigers, and strawberries. Oh my, lots of stories. And so it would be remiss of me, wouldn't it, if on this first Sunday of our month of story, I didn't invite you to consider and question yet another set of stories. In honor of our coming of age service next Sunday, a service in which our wise and spirited youth will share their personal statements of belief. Today, during our service, we'll consider the stories we tell and are told about God. Our opening words are lyrics written by the Sufi poet and lover of God, Hafiz. The poem is entitled, "Now is the Time." Now is the time to know that all you do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truce with yourself and God? Now is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you finally live with veracity and love. My dear, please tell me, why do you still throw sticks at your heart and God? What is it in that sweet voice inside that incites you to fear? Now is the time for the world to know that every thought and action is sacred. This is the time for you to compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. Now is the season to know that everything you do is sacred. Good morning, my friends. Happy May, happy Beltane. Now is the time. What a strange and wondrous gift it is to be alive together on this fresh spring day. I'm so grateful for it. As I light the symbol of our faith, won't you join me in our chalice lighting words? My jumping box of matches. We light our chalice in peace and friendship. Our opening hymn, I think, is my favorite hymn. It's number 127, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." Lyrics are printed in your order of worship.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come thou
Thanks, Sam. Friends, we now come to the time in our service that we set aside for silent prayer and meditation. If you're listening while working on a project, eating, drinking, or wandering around, I invite you during this time to set down what's in your hands and just let yourself relax, quiet down, and be still for a moment. This time of quiet is a time to offer a prayer for those in need of prayer. Reflect on the events, the joys, the sorrows of the past week. Look forward to what may come in the days ahead, or simply be here now, in this moment, and all that it offers us in sensation and emotion. During this time of stillness, I keep at the top of my heart and at the forefront of my mind the millions of people suffering and grieving in India right now, as multiple variants of the COVID virus spread at an alarming pace through cities, towns, and villages. My friends, won't you join me now in taking a deep breath, exhaling out, making space in your being, and joining me for this sacred time of quiet. For all that can be shared, for all we hold inside, for all we simply do not have the words to express. We hear you, we hold you, and we wish you immediate comfort, continued joy, a path forward, and the seeds of peace. Amen. Andrew will now introduce our offering. Thank you, Andrew.
In honor of our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, this week's offering is shared with the Yarmouth High School's Black Student Union, formerly known as the Black Student Alliance. The group is an alliance of Yarmouth's Black students and their allies, created to respond to racist events in Yarmouth, and is working with RJIM, the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine, and YCARE, the Yarmouth Community Alliance for Racial Equity. The students are currently raising funds for healing and justice-oriented activities, including a trip to the Museum of African American History in Boston. You're invited to make your offering using the donate button in the order of worship. By clicking this link, you'll be taken to GiveButter, a virtual giving site that accepts a card number, PayPal, and Venmo accounts. You may also give your offering by dropping a check in the mail or using your bank's free bill pay feature. This morning's offering has now been requested and will be gratefully received. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Our reading today is from the transcendentalist theologian and beloved UU ancestor, Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's an excerpt from his essay, The Oversoul. And I don't know if you've read an essay by Emerson recently, but one of my favorite things about reading Emerson is that the further he goes into his writing, the more exclamation points he starts using. And this excerpt that I've chosen from The Oversoul is kind of like right in the middle, and towards the end, there's a lot of exclamation points that start to splatter in the writing. So just imagine that as you listen along. He writes, "We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. But meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related. This is the eternal one. Ineffable is this union of man and God in every act of the soul. How dear, how soothing to man arises the idea of God, peopling the lonely place, effacing the scars of our mistakes and disappointments. When we have broken from our God of tradition and ceased from our God of rhetoric, then may God fire our heart with God's presence. This is the doubling of the heart itself, nay, the infinite enlargement of the heart with a power of growth to a new infinity on every side. It inspires in man an infallible trust. He is sure that his welfare is dear to the heart of being. He believes that he cannot escape from the good. You are running to seek your friend. Let your feet run, but your mind need not. Oh, believe as thou liveth that every sound that is spoken over the round world which thou ought to hear will vibrate in thine ear! Exclamation point. Every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to thee for aid of comfort shall surely come home through open and winding passages! Exclamation point. Every friend whom the great and tender heart in thee craveth shall lock thee in embrace. And this because the heart in thee is the heart of all! Exclamation point. Not a valve, not a wall, not an intersection is there anywhere in nature, but one blood rolls uninterruptedly, an endless circulation through all, as the water of the globe is all one sea, and truly its tide, one tide." Oh, Emerson. Whew. Okay, so for a handful of summers, a decade or so ago, I taught at an immersive summer school called the Advanced Studies Program. ASP, as it was called, is at once a rigorous college preparatory program and a lighthearted summer camp. Taking place from the last week of June through the end of July in Concord, New Hampshire, ASP accepted rising high school seniors from public schools across New Hampshire for an intensive 5-week deep dive into one particular area of study. Students could choose from such intensives as robotics, sustainable agriculture, astronomy, studio art, game theory, and world religions, which obviously was the course that I taught. Each summer, before delving into some of the particularities that shape the religions of our world, I would take the first couple of world religions classes, which met for 5-hour blocks, and just throw around some terminology and big concepts with the kids. Through art projects, writing prompts, discussion, physical activities, and more, we consider ideas such as ritual and sacred, life, death, afterlife, good, evil. And we'd also contemplate the moods and meanings of archetypes and symbols. And eventually, usually after a snack break, I'd stand in front of the class and say something along the lines of, okay, I'm gonna write a word on the board. And when I do, I want you to just holler out whatever comes to you when you think of this thing. And then, in big capital letters, I'd write God in the middle of our whiteboard. Okay, God, what comes to mind? Holler at me. There would usually be a pause for a moment, and then the responses would start flying. Father, Almighty, He's everything. Creator, the boss, not real. Love, nature, energy, beard, Beyonce. Friends, I know I said I taught these classes some 10 or 12 years ago, but I remember these exchanges vividly because they pretty much happen the same way every single year. Were we in person right now, I would have loved to do this exercise with you in our sanctuary. After a momentary pause, I'm sure it would have gotten wild fast. With each response the students hollered, I would draw a line outward from God and write down their word. Once the responses began to slow, I'd step back, look at the board, and ask a few clarifying questions. Like, okay, so we got Father up here. What makes God a father more than a mother? Or, so we have Creator of the earth up here. Would you say the earth and everything that happens on the earth is perfect? If not, would we say that God makes mistakes? Or, folks, there's a lot up here. Is there just one God in charge of all of this, or many gods, or is God like an energy field? If God is ever present and the present is always changing, does God change? I keep writing the keywords of their responses as they gradually got more and more expansive, until often I was just drawing pictures or peppering random question marks and exclamation points around the board. Here's an image of what our whiteboard looked like at the end of one of these sessions in June, which is pretty much what it looked like every year. Oh, let's do it. I think this is from 2011. My favorite part is right here in the bottom center, the big capital Y followed by the OMG. I imagine that probably occurred when, towards the end of our conversations, when kids were just like, Miss CG, no more. Oh my gosh. But if you look around there, kind of encapsulates a lot of what comes to mind when we think about this thing, God. Though I definitely have opinions about what God is, and even stronger opinions about what God isn't, I never use this exercise as an opportunity to impose my beliefs on the students, nor did I have much patience for students who tried to impose their beliefs or disbeliefs on others. My goal for this exercise wasn't to get clear on what was to be. My goal for this exercise wasn't to get clear on what was to be believed about God, Rather, it was a chance to expand our understandings of what could be believed about God. And then take a moment to wonder what believing in a particular definition of God does to a person's understanding of their life and the world in which they are alive. Just play with me for a moment here and let go of whatever your story of God is to the best of your ability. Just let go, just put it over there and just get expansive and consider the uses and the impacts of this huge idea that is God. What is it? What does the creator God of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel do for us? What does it do to us? What does it do with us? What about Avalokiteshvara here? The 10,000 armed Tibetan Buddhist bodhisattva of ultimate compassion, who sees in all directions and all dimensions with his 11 heads. What if we believe that Avalokiteshvara is at work within us, is an aspect of ourselves? What happens to our relationship with God when we imagine or believe in a God that cannot be depicted by human hands, cannot be seen by human eyes on earth, like Allah, the all-merciful, all-knowing, all-powerful God of Islam? What does that do to people, for people, with people? What happens to our relationship with God when we reclaim God, like the modern day artist Harmonia Rosales here with her painting, The Creation of God? What's it like to believe that God is much more than a singular entity, much more than a recognizable being, but rather is a pattern, is an energy, a source, something beyond words? Perhaps this understanding of God emerges while in meditation or prayer. Such was the experience of the theosophist Hilma af Klint, who rendered hundreds of paintings depicting images of the divine order of things, images she believed were shared with her by godly messages. And yes, I do have a Hilma af Klint behind me here. What happens to our perception of ourselves, our sense of belonging, and our relationship to all life when we have an Emersonian moment and unify ourselves from part and particle and find our way back to God, that is the eternal one, the universal beauty, the highest truth, the wise silence, the oversoul? This image here is a rendering of one of Emerson's idea of the transparent eyeball, which is from his essay Nature, which is a great read. A friend of his drew this. Emerson believed that when we encountered that oversoul, encountered that eternal one, we just took it all in like a transparent eyeball. And what about when God is present in a well-trodden path? and something that is known and familiar and beloved when God is present in a home, in your sanctuary. Oops, sorry guys, stop share. Oh, the days of tech, my friends. Am I still sharing or is that gone? Is gone? Great. It's a lot of God out there. What about if God is just present in a cup of coffee? I'm sure we've all had that moment too. Now, I know many of you tuning in today, if asked, would say you don't believe in God. Any God, the God of the Sistine Chapel or the God best seen through a transparent eyeball. And that's fine. But whether or not you believe in God, God exists. God is a huge and ever-present idea that is very active in our world. And God compels a lot of people to act certain ways, feel certain things, and trust certain facts to be undeniably true. In this sense, no matter what God is or isn't, God is here with us. In A History of God, religious scholar and former Catholic nun Karen Armstrong writes, when I began to research the history of the experience and the idea of God, I expected to find that God had simply been a projection of human needs and desires. My predictions were not entirely unjustified, but I have been extremely surprised by some of my findings, and I wish I'd learned all of this 30 years ago. It would have saved me a great deal of anxiety to hear from eminent monotheists that instead of waiting for God to descend from on high, I should deliberately create a sense of God for myself. Other rabbis, priests, and Sufis would have taken me to task for assuming that God was a reality out there. They would have warned me not to expect to experience God as an objective fact that could be discovered by the process of rational thought. They would have told me that in an important sense, God was a product of the creative imagination. She concludes, a few highly respected monotheists would have told me quietly and firmly that God did not really exist. And yet, God was the most important reality in the world. God does not really exist, and yet God is the most important reality in the world. Or maybe God does exist, and God is the most important reality in the world. I don't know. Friends, what's your story of God? How did you learn it? Did someone teach it to you, or did you discover it? Was it an act of creative imagination? Is God out there? What does this God do or not do for you, to you, with you? How does this story of God help you live a good life? Does it help you live a good life? What other stories could you tell or learn about God? Here's a story of God that I've found productive. So, I'm not an alcoholic, but I've been stirred by the God of 12-step recovery programs for years. So stirred, I wrote my master's thesis in divinity school on the role of the higher power in addiction recovery. This higher power, this God, as I gathered from AA literature and conversations with folks in recovery from alcoholism, drug addiction, and eating disorders, is a God of presence, and action. This God makes total sense to me. Bill W., the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, describes his higher power as a God of his own conception. He calls the manifestation of the higher power in his life God consciousness, essentially the steady, benevolent presence of something greater than his own common sense, or nonsense, as he often called it, that was with him at all times when he made himself available to it. The higher power of AA for many in the program is this God of constant presence. For some, the higher power takes the form of Jesus Christ, of Yahweh, of Allah, of the Lord God, Father Almighty. For others, God's presence presents itself as a choice to do something other than drink, a choice to do something other than follow the urges of an addictive compulsion, which is something everyone struggles with from time to time. In my thesis titled "The Way God Feels," I argued that God consciousness naturally leads to pausing throughout one's day to experience God moments. Moments when a person was able to feel God, to feel something big and good with them. It was an activating energy that lifted awareness to the opportunities that lie in front of us, opportunities for us to act with compassion, with restoration, with healing, curiosity, and courage. The higher power interrupts our negative thought patterns and provides a choice in that pause, in that interruption, to do something that will make our day better than worse. I often imagine this higher power as like a loved one who grabs your attention when you're spacing out and says, "Hey, you okay? What's going on? What do you need right now? What do you actually need right now? What would be good for you right now?" And this higher power, though I see it in that friend, can manifest in myriad forms. While writing and continuing to this day in discussions with friends in recovery, I've been told of moments when God is present in a cup of coffee that gets a person out of bed in the morning when they cannot bear to face the world. I've been told of moments when God was present in a beautiful, calming shaft of golden light that slowly moved along the wall of a room. Moments when God was present in a neighbor's cat, when it suddenly jumped up on a porch and lay in the sun with someone. God was present when a person chose to say, "I love you," to another person for the first time. God was present in moments of sitting down and listening to music, present in moments of chopping vegetables, present in moments of walking and smiling at others and receiving a smile in return. Real moments, mundane moments, life moments, but moments that interrupted something and caused a shift to occur so that something good could happen. The soul that ascends to worship the great God is plain and true, writes Emerson. It has no rose color, no fine friends, no chivalry, no adventures, does not want admiration, dwells in the hour that now is, in the earnest experience of the common day. By reason of the present moment and the mere trifle having become porous to thought, having become available to the sea of light. My friends, I offer you this survey of stories about God today not to change your minds about God, nor to compel you to believe in one God or another, or God at all. Rather, I share these words simply as an invitation for you to contemplate your own God consciousness, to lift your awareness to the God moments in your day-to-day life, no matter what you call God in those moments, no matter how God manifests to you in a pause and a shift towards the good. I know that many of you are overwhelmed right now, overwhelmed by trying to process the events of the past year, overwhelmed by the reopening and reacclimating process of right now, overwhelmed by the daunting project of dismantling racism, overwhelmed by the fact that getting the vaccine didn't make everything instantly better, overwhelmed by personal struggles, health issues, money issues, your children's needs. What if we welcomed a higher power to help us pause right now and see what choices are present for us in these overwhelming times? It could just be a shaft of light, a cup of coffee, anything that interrupts your story. What choices for good are here now, in this moment? Now is the time to know, my friends, that all you do is sacred. Easy does it. Keep it simple. One day at a time. God, whatever you are, grant us the serenity to pause from time to time and live fully. Choose wisely. Change our patterns and act for good. Amen. Let it be so. Our closing hymn is another favorite, I believe number 1020. Whoa, yeah, yeah.
Heaven knows where we are going, but we know it, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know it. Lord, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know it. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. But we know
Thank you all so much for joining us this Sunday morning. It was great to be together. I'll see you in a few moments for Divine Coffee Hour. Before that time comes, won't you join me in a time of prayer? May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all experience profound joy and the causes of profound joy. May we all be free to change, to shift, to pause, and make choices to create good for all. And please join me in our unison benediction. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. For those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Our service has ended, my friends. Go in peace and enjoy this May day. We'll see you next Sunday for our coming of age service.